This is how a time traveler almost failed to save the future in 24 hours. But in this race against time, the unusual savior had to break the rules, reveal classified secrets, and gamble the fate of the future, all while uncovering a shocking twist of fate. It's the year 2050, and Joseph Serrano is a veteran fugitive recovery agent from the year 2097. He works for the Time Travel Bureau and is tasked with tracing, capturing, and extraditing time-traveling fugitives back to the future. It's nighttime, and Joseph faces off with a fugitive that he trapped on a roof by using the woman he's protecting as bait, who also happens to be the fugitive's target. For the last few hours, Joseph was chased by this man, the most dangerous fugitive he's ever faced, and nearly failed to protect the most important victim he's ever encountered on a mission. Joseph has never lost the high ground in a battle waged against a fugitive, but this enemy's elusive essence makes him a formidable foe. Joseph finally corners him, but the woman's rapidly growing fear unveils his illusion of victory. Despite rescuing her, Joseph is the one she inches away from, pleading for her life with tears in her eyes. Joseph is confused as to why she's scared of him, and not the fugitive. Why can't she see the truth? What does she see that Joseph doesn't? With everyone's lives hanging in the balance, the secret behind the fugitive's identity is shocking. Joseph is stationed in the year 2050 to trace, capture, and extradite 4 time-traveling fugitives, also known as unauthorized travelers. He detains the final fugitive, who is a disciple of a domestic criminal from the future that attempted to eliminate the Time Travel Bureau chairman on the day he was born. Only governments can legally travel back in time, but time travel access is still illegally sold by third parties to unauthorized travelers desperate to change the past. Joseph locates fugitives using an implantable brain-machine interface, or BMI. It's a device implanted in the brain that allows people to communicate with other humans, computers, and devices using their thoughts. By 2050, all humans have an implant, and Joseph's government-approved BMI lets him connect to anything and anyone without permission. All 4 missions are complete, but Joseph delays returning to the future. The pain of his wife's recent passing makes it difficult to live in a future without her. From ages 40 to 45, he met, married, and buried her. Haunted by her final words, he's tempted to permanently stay in the past, where she exists, hereby defying the Bureau, becoming an unauthorized traveler, and being forever hunted. The adrenaline from Joseph's last mission still ignites his veins, and the punishment he'll face for delaying his return to the future isn't easing his nerves. He walks to decompress and uses his BMI to read civilians' minds, despite it being illegal for off-duty agents. Since his wife's passing, he's felt very alone, and the only way to ease it is by finding companionship in the minds of other people. Suddenly, a man's thoughts of using a fugitive recovery agent to hunt down a woman consumes Joseph. Only those from the future know about agents, so he must be an unauthorized traveler. Joseph's BMI fails to scan his face and identify him, and he isn't on the fugitive hit list. For this fugitive to practically be a ghost, he must be dangerous and have powerful allies. Joseph isn't prepared to intercept, so he leaves the fugitive for whatever agent is assigned to capture and extradite him. But then, Joseph senses his desperation to hack a fugitive recovery agent's BMI to connect to the woman's brain without permission. A time limit concerns the fugitive, and he will do anything to infiltrate her mind before it's too late. An untrained hostile takeover of any BMI can damage a person's brain, and letting this fugitive roam free to change the future is against protocol. So Joseph decides to follow, capture, and extradite him back to the future. Joseph discreetly follows the fugitive to the woman's apartment. He has no choice but to sneak in and spy on the fugitive in case he tries to attack her. Joseph's BMI senses the fugitive's growing anger as he frantically searches for the woman in the empty apartment. Moments later, she finally arrives. Joseph scales the apartment to get close to her, cloaking himself in the shadows. Since he's hidden, Joseph can't scan her face, access her BMI, and identify her, but he's ready to defend her if chaos erupts. Joseph silently trails her as she makes her way to the bedroom, where the fugitive lies in wait. Just when Joseph thinks the fugitive will attack, he doesn't. Despite his time limit, the fugitive believes that revealing himself would be pointless if he can't hack into a fugitive recovery agent's BMI to freely access her mind. But now that he has her in sight, all he needs to do is find any fugitive recovery agent. The woman changes into all black and leaves the apartment. The fugitive rushes after her. Rather than capturing him, Joseph decides to follow him to uncover the motives behind his obsession. Joseph follows the woman to a desolate cemetery, where she stares at a tombstone that stands like a sentinel guarding the secrets of her past. With the fugitive lurking in the fog in this barren land, her life inches closer to the muted voices that lay beneath her feet. The fugitive's thoughts of capturing her are overpowering, and he wishes he had access to an agent's BMI during this vulnerable moment of hers. With an almost supernatural grace, Joseph intercepts before he can. Joseph's arrival spooks her. To trust a stranger is to invite deceit, so she rejects his demands to escape. To her, the only threat in sight is him. Despite trying to save her, Joseph's words fall upon deaf ears, and the fugitive spirals with anger as he meddles with his target. Joseph grows impatient with the verbal tug-of-war and resorts to more convincing persuasion. Using his BMI, Joseph's brain dumps into her mind memories of the fugitive breaking into her apartment. She struggles to identify the fugitive within the blurred memories and questions whether they're real or fake. Him accessing her mind without permission frightens her, and with her courage now residing with the dead, she obeys his plea to escape. But Joseph's Hail Mary to save her life forces the fugitive to come after him. Joseph apprehended the fugitive's target, and the fugitive somehow knows he's a fugitive recovery agent. While Joseph escorts her out of the cemetery, the name on the tombstone she visited shocks him. Peter Navarro, Joseph's late wife's father's name. With the fugitive pursuing Joseph and the woman, they flee the cemetery and find refuge in a deserted street. Joseph listens for unwanted footsteps, but all he hears is the woman's shallow, rapid breath. After noticing Peter's name on the tombstone, Joseph uses his BMI to identify her and confirm his fear. She is Catalina, Joseph's late wife's mother. He realizes if Peter has passed, then Catalina must already be pregnant. He's not only safeguarding Catalina, he's also shielding the person he loved most, growing inside her. He reveals that he is a fugitive recovery agent protecting her from an unauthorized traveler. He keeps his connection to her a secret, as he suspects that an enemy from the future plots to use his wife's life against him. His time-traveling backstory makes her question his sanity, as time travel isn't invented until 2062. The fugitive's thoughts come into the vicinity of Joseph's BMI. Joseph tenses up from the scorching desperation radiating from the fugitive as his time runs short. Catalina notices the shift in Joseph's body language. She claims to see a strange man staring at her from across the street. Joseph turns around, only to have his foolishness, and not the fugitive, staring back. Catalina runs off and escapes into a roaring protest down the street, ringing an open season for the hunter once more. Catalina vanishes inside the protest's turbulence. Joseph's confidence collapses into a void under the failure to protect his late wife once again. The situation outgrows the sole threat of conspiring phantoms from the future when he receives an urgent request from the Time Travel Bureau. His delayed return to the future has violated Cardinal Bureau rules. Failure to return now will result in him becoming an unauthorized traveler, prompting the deployment of agents to capture and extradite him. He weighs out his options against suffocating odds. Already facing the suspension of his time travel license, he can't return to face the consequences until he saves Catalina and his late wife and ensures the ongoing threat is defeated. Like a spell, Joseph's devotion to his wife drives him to ignore the Bureau's request and find Catalina before the agents find him. He commits to flattening any threat, so he marches toward the protest and gets swept into the rampage. The streets pulsate with grief and tension as hordes of protesters converge in a symphony of howls and fury. The noise is deafening, the pushing and shoving relentless, and the air thick with sweat and desperation. Police officers exert pressure to contain the protest. Joseph struggles to locate Catalina and the fugitive as the chaos intensifies. His panic mirrors the swarm's sharpening rage as her life bows more toward the fugitive with every second. Suddenly, Joseph sees the fugitive drifting toward Catalina. Joseph can't move through the congestion quickly enough to save her, so he uses his BMI to send a mass signal to run to every BMI in the area. This foreign message confuses the protesters and disperses the crowd. He reaches Catalina before the fugitive. Before he's able to escort her to safety, she demands police officers to rescue her. She's still convinced that Joseph is a deranged stranger fixated on a delusional fantasy. The officers flank him, inching closer to his adrenaline-flushed body. They tower over him, reaching out like the hand of God. Catalina motions forward, but Joseph's grip chains her to the ground. He has but a second to act before they capture him. Only a miracle or radical action can save him and his mission, and desperate times call for desperate measures. Like a foreign virus, a hostile takeover of anyone's BMI can cause long-term side effects, but it's a risk Joseph is willing to take. He uses his BMI to illegally override the officers' BMI protocols and knocks them unconscious. Outrunning the fugitive's time limit doesn't make Catalina any safer. So Joseph uses the fugitive's sense of urgency against him to lure him into a trap and extradite him back to the future. He escorts Catalina into a nearby skyscraper. They arrive at the skyscraper's rooftop, and Joseph stations Catalina in front of the entrance to lure in the fugitive while he lies in wait to ambush him. The fates of Catalina, Joseph's wife, and the future timeline rest unsteadily on Joseph's shoulders as the fugitive's time limit to override Catalina's BMI and connect to her brain rages on. As the fugitive glides through the door toward Catalina, Joseph demands him to freeze. With the fugitive in sight, relief washes over Joseph now that Catalina can finally believe everything he said. Strangely enough, she inches away from him, pleading for her life with tears in her eyes. She reveals that the only person she sees is Joseph. Joseph can't understand why she's unable to see the fugitive until he declares that he is not a person, but the ghost of Peter Navarro, here to relay a message to the woman he loves. Joseph's government-approved BMI is a highly perceptive model that connects to humans and machines. But BMIs have never been tested to detect the presence of the departed. Joseph struggles to think straight. A ghost? Really? Peter begs him not to hurt her, but Joseph tells him that he was protecting her this whole time. Joseph expresses how his BMI senses Peter's thoughts and misunderstood them as malicious. With a minute left before Peter disappears, Joseph says it's too risky for an untrained person to take over his BMI, let alone a ghost. Instead, he offers to relay the message to her, but needs Peter's help to win her faith. Catalina's eyes widen in disbelief when Joseph mentions Peter's message. Joseph recounts their love to her. How when Peter first saw her, it was the first time he thought with his heart instead of his head, where he felt he knew a stranger better than he knew himself, and how at first she kept him as a friend, but slowly fell in love as if gravity was at play. While choking up, Joseph shares Peter's last declaration of love, which was also the last thing Joseph's wife said to him before passing. "If my heart ever stops on earth, know it will beat for you in heaven, waiting for you to hear it again." Tears soak Catalina's face as Joseph reveals Peter's final message. Grief is the price of love, but the pain of parting is nothing to the joy of meeting again. So don't move on from grief. Move forward with it, and our baby. As Peter vanishes into the wind, he is lucky enough to hear Catalina say one last time, "I will always love you, An hour has passed since Catalina left and thanked Joseph. He roams the streets pondering on Peter's message. Distant footsteps of approaching federal recovery agents echo louder and louder. He's overstayed his welcome and has become an unauthorized traveler. Despite incoming doom, Joseph's mind busies itself reflecting on the pain he's carried after losing his wife. Nothing can drag him out of the internal struggle between being scared to live in a future without her and learning to live with grief. Should he live the rest of his life in the past where she exists, loving her in secret from a distance, or return to the future and move forward with his grief? The agents will descend upon him any minute now. If he wants any chance to escape, it's now or never. But if he prolongs his voyage in the past, the government's orders will only escalate. Joseph approaches an area completely shrouded in darkness, where he can escape without a trace. He turns to look at the agents. Should he surrender to his fear or his grief? As the darkness inches closer to him, so do the agents. And for the first time in what feels like eternity, he hears her heartbeat again.